Welcome to the Intuitive Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Rafferty, medical doctor, PhD, Reiki and shamanic intuitive healer. I'm here to bring you on a journey of holistic healing that explores the science of the physical body, combined with mental and emotional well-being, energetic and spiritual health. And I am so excited to have you here again, another week under our belt. As the number of podcasts grows and we continue to explore our inner world of energy and emotion and connection to what lays beyond. So I'm so excited to have you again here with me. We've been doing lots of pods recently about energy, and we have had fantastic feedback. It's just so intriguing the more that people get into this deep awareness of what's happening in their body. It just expands our awareness of ourselves and our relationship to others and the universe around us. And I really have been seeing something showing up so regularly in my practice recently with my friends and within my own sense of self that I was like, I need to record an episode on this. And it's all about the wound of responsibility, of people stepping into responsibility for themselves, but also acknowledging where they're holding responsibility for other people's stuff that's not theirs. So, this can really cause a deep energetic imprint within the solar plexus. And this is our center of self-worth and value and personal power. And I've recorded a couple of episodes specific to this energy center previously. However, I wanted to really look at this specific core energy and how it kind of links into our journey with self-worth and value. And how, when we have wounds with responsibility, it can strip us of our personal power. Responsibility is quite sacred in so many ways. It's how we claim our life force and how we steward our energy. So, responsibility can come with a wound, and we can either avoid it altogether, we can avoid responsibility, or we can take on more than we actually can carry. And this can cause so many issues in your energy field. And it can just lead to such a sense of burnout, a feeling of dejection. There's just so much that can happen in response to these wounds. So I really wanted to explore today. So we'll just kick off, I suppose, with regard to looking at what responsibility looks like when it's actually balanced, when we have a healthy relationship to responsibility. And what does that even mean? That means that we're accountable for ourselves. We stand in our power when it comes to our choices. We have a healthy, responsible relationship with our bodies, with our energy, with our mental and emotional well-being, with our healing journey, and it's not about perfection or control when it comes to all of these aspects of our being. And I know that sometimes I can find my way into this space where I try to take responsibility in a perfect way, or responsibility like verges into kind of control and how I can control the environment around me. But, it's not about that. It's actually about showing up with integrity for what is truly ours to hold. What do we need to take responsibility for within our world? And when we are in balance with this, when this energy is balanced in the body, we feel so empowered because we're taking responsibility for our stuff. And I know myself, when I create a lovely sense of structure within my world, whether that's my home life or my work life, stepping into that responsible space, I just feel so empowered. It gives me great clarity. It gives me really clear direction in which I feel I need to move. And it gives me a really strong sense of self-worth that I'm really taking responsibility for myself. I'm eating well. I'm out moving my body. They're my physical responsibilities. I look after my mind through my therapy work and my deep inner child work. And I mind my energy through my energy hygiene practices. So that's generally what I tend to go on a journey with. Um, and, when you're in a lovely balanced state with all of this, it just allows your solar plexus energy to radiate with this gorgeous, steady, unwavering confidence. And just keeping in mind, the solar plexus just sits at the center of the top of the tummy, just below your rib cage. And I see so many people that come into me with gut disturbances or pains in that space and a lot of acid reflux and stuff like that. It's all about anger and frustration and kind of issues in how the energy circulates and moves in this space. And when we have kind of imbalances within the energetics of responsibility, it can really put a strain on that energy center and worsen some of our physical body symptoms. And, things like acid reflux, it's literally the burning, the anger that's rising because we feel we're being pushed to the limit with taking on other people's stuff sometimes. So it's really good to kind of tune into the body. And if you're having issues in this upper part of your tummy, any digestive issues, I tend to find that potentially this is one of the energies at play and it's not in balance. Now, I just wanted to speak with regard to discernment and judgment, because they're two sides of the same coin that can impact our sense of responsibility. So, first of all, I want to speak about discernment, because discernment is this beautiful energy of truth that lives within us. It helps us to know what is ours and what is not ours. And it's often grounded in neutrality and clarity for kind of what's happening in the world around us. But in contrast to this, judgment is the flip side of the coin. And this is often a mental and egoic driven process that occurs within us. And often judgment comes with criticism and comparison and sometimes shame. And that can either be directed outwards to others or it can be directed inwards upon ourselves. So, usually, kind of this journey with responsibility, it involves tuning deeply into our energy of discernment, and when we can sit within a lovely discerning space and actually recognize, actually, this belongs to me, and perhaps this does not belong to me. We're using discernment as we navigate our world of responsibility. However, when it comes to responsibility, if judgment or the egoic mind gets involved, it tends to kind of sound a little bit more like, if I don't do this for them, I'm a bad person. So it's really important to really tune into your body to learn the differences of what discernment feels like over judgment. And that's the key to finding balance in responsibility in our lives. And I love this. So I really try to challenge my clients and I challenge myself all the time that when I kind of feel this activation in my solar plexus, when I actually sit down and I feel, oh my God, something is weighing heavy on me here, have I taken on a responsibility for someone else's tasks that aren't mine? I will sit and tune into whether whether my gut's trying to tell me something in a really discerning way. And if the voice of judgment is loud within my head and it's linked in some way to my sense of self-worth or value, I know that it's potentially that I'm carrying someone else's load on their behalf. So I absolutely love really sitting with discernment versus responsibility when we are on this journey, or discernment versus judgment when we're on this journey with responsibility. Now, I want to go a little bit more into the actual wound of responsibility. And this can be really interesting when we begin to go into the depths of some of this stuff, because sometimes we can become under responsible, and that is basically a reflection of a solar plexus that is blocked or stagnant, and the energy isn't moving in the way that it should. Or we can end up in a space of over responsibility, which is a hyperactive energetic center or a hyperactive solar plexus space. Now, first of all, I want to speak into under responsibility. This often entails or includes avoidance or denial. Now, we've all been there. And I just laugh when I think about this because there were several people in my life when I was younger that used to just say, "Don't worry, darling, denial and repression," and that's how they used to navigate their world. Um, and the thing is, as kids, we pick these phrases and things up, and then we take them on as our own as we navigate through our life. Now, generally speaking, under responsibility, this tendency towards avoidance and denial, it often has emotional or trauma based roots that arise in childhood. And that potentially can be from neglect or potentially a parent that overprotected you from the world. You know, a child who is never held accountable for their actions when they're younger, or who learns that taking responsibility leads to punishment or shame, may actually grow into an adult who avoids ownership. And this is the avoidance piece. So, really, really interesting. You can see both ends of the spectrum there. Really playing out in this wound. So, if you feel that potentially you have an energy of under responsibility and that you have a tendency more towards avoidance or denial that things are really happening the way they are, have a little sit and think about your childhood. Did you feel emotionally neglected, potentially, physically neglected? Or potentially you were overprotected, where you didn't actually have to take responsibility for anything. I tend to find that if we have this energy within the solar plexus, I see within some of my client discussions, kind of trying to shift the blame away from our actions onto other people, rather than actually sitting in it and being like, oh God, I need to take responsibility for the fact that I was a bit of a shit in that moment, you know? Um, and one thing I tend to see quite readily is an energy of victimhood. Like we are the victim of the world and the people around us, rather than stepping into a place of responsibility and accepting that sometimes our actions may lead to some of these circumstances. Also, some folks refuse to make decisions. Now, I have been an absolute devil for this in my life with regard to decision makings. And, you know, sometimes I used to think about it and reflect on it and think, oh, but it's okay. You know, I'm happy if the other person is happy, you know, and this kind of people pleasing mentality coming in. But actually, ultimately, the deeper I get into this in my own journey and with my clients, everybody has an opinion. Everybody has an opinion, but you may not feel safe to actually share that opinion. And sometimes by basically shifting the decision making onto someone else, it allows you to actually avoid identifying what you really want and speaking your truth in that moment, you know? So that's really, really important. In addition to that, some people expect others to step in and rescue them. The universe will rescue me, like other people will step in and rescue me. But the reality of it is, we are here to rescue ourselves. We are here to rescue ourselves. And, you know, sometimes the universe and the people around us, they're waiting for us to step into our own power. You know, sometimes I see this on some deep spiritual and energetic journeys. And I know this has happened to me. I'm like, please come and save me in this moment. Spirit guides, come to me. And it feels like they're not stepping in sometimes. And, you know, that's a hard lesson that I've had to learn, that I think in reality, the space has been left there for me to find my own power and actually take responsibility for things that are happening around me. On an energetic level, like I say, this avoidance of responsibility causes almost like a collapse in the solar plexus energy that leads to a leakiness in your personal power. Now, with regard to over responsibility, What does that look like? That essentially looks like you carrying the weight of the world of other people on your shoulders. And where does the emotional and traumatic roots of this tend to come from? So, typically speaking, we can end up sometimes in childhood in a state of parentification. And what does that mean? That's when a child is forced to act like a parent. And sometimes we haven't been in a home where potentially our parents were responsible themselves, and we kind of stepped into this space in which we became a parent, and we grew up very quickly at a really young age. Potentially you were caring for your siblings, potentially we're managing the emotions of one of your primary caregivers. And this is so, so evident. And I see it all the time. I think sometimes in the generations that came before us, they didn't have these healing tools that we now lean into. They didn't have access to therapy. They didn't have access to the tools that they could potentially have used to regulate their emotional bodies. And their nervous systems were just shot. And ultimately, it forced their children to step into a parental role from a very, very young age. Some children that kind of experience this parentification are also conflict mediators in the home. Potentially, you regulated people's nervous systems and mediated conflict between siblings. It could have been caregivers. So really, really interesting, very deep rooted, energetic imprinting that goes on during these circumstances. Over responsibility can also arise from enmeshment, in which we have a lack of boundaries between ourself and our caregiver. So it's this kind of codependency arrives. So the child ultimately learns in those circumstances to take on other people's emotions as their own. Now, this is fascinating because when people come into me and I put my hands on their energy fields, you can immediately feel these energy cores. And even sometimes when I call the energies in of loved ones, people who have passed away, various different circumstances in the world around these people, there's an overlap in the energy fields. And it's fascinating because ultimately our journey here in this world is to become sovereign in our own energy. And when we go on this journey where there's a lack of boundaries, we become enmeshed in other people's circumstances, their dramas, and other people's emotions are taken on by our energy fields. And that can be so tricky because some people become so enmeshed, they don't know where their emotions end and the other person's emotions begin, And in these circumstances, it can be really, really hard to really define and discern what's yours and what's someone else's. In these circumstances, sometimes I see that love is conditional. And this is where the self-worth piece comes in. You're only safe or worthy if you meet everyone else's needs around you first. And that can be so draining. It can be so, so draining. Now, patterns that I tend to see in folks that carry this energy of over responsibility is that they rescue people. They step in to rescue people left, right, and center. They are people pleasers, they're perfectionists, and I'm going to put my hand up here and say I have gone through all of these things. I've definitely have navigated all of these things. Still am, let's be honest. And, when you step into rescue and people please, when people come to you with their problems, you then, because you are in this state of over responsibility, you to try to control the outcome of their life circumstances. And then people get really bloody frustrated because they're like, I didn't want you to tell me what to do. And they feel like you're kind of dictating what the outcome should be. And that's really confusing for people, because it's like, well, you came to me to take on this burden of responsibility, and then you don't want to hear how I'm going to fix it for you. So it can be tricky. And I tend to find in these circumstances, one really lovely way that we can actually navigate this wound with people, when they come to you, you can actually ask them, Are you here for me to listen, or are you looking for advice and support around this? And you know what? That really gets people to sit and think, because sometimes they just want you to have an open ear and a safe space to have a bit of a rant. They don't want you to step in and control their outcomes. So it can be really actually a good tool for both parties involved in really teasing out this energy of over responsibility. I also see sometimes that there's this constant guilt if they're not doing enough. Oh my God, if this doesn't speak to my soul, I don't know what else does. But yeah, this guilt, the guilt of not doing enough. Oh my God, that is so real. And I'd love for you to have a little think to yourself. Is that something that you feel yourself? Sitting on the couch at night, do you feel you should be doing something? If you get a precious 5 moments by yourself, are you thinking of things that you should be squeezing into that space? Now, on an energetic relation or on an energetic level, this over responsibility, like I say, creates a hyperactive solar plexus in which the energy tends to spin within that space very, very quickly. And it burns out quickly, and it can also pull energy in from other energetic centers. And that leads to exhaustion, it leads to resentment of other people, and it leads to emotional depletion. It's not something that we can continue to do on an ongoing level. And it can really ultimately impact your friendships and your relationships, because sometimes when we take on the over responsible role, we develop all of these hidden expectations, because if we've taken on all of their crap, why aren't they stepping in to take on my crap when I need them to? So you become silently resentful in those moments, but ultimately a lot of people can't step in to take on what you have because you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. So it's all about finding a nice balance with all of this stuff. I do want to highlight that we can actually hold both extremes within our energy body, and many people that I see hold both wounds simultaneously. So potentially at work, you may overfunction and carry everybody's needs and responsibilities within a work setting. And then at home, you get in, you completely collapse in the evenings and you avoid your own responsibilities. You can't make yourself a healthy meal. You're not going to the gym and you're not washing your clothes. So you can see how you can kind of ebb and flow between these two energies on the day to day. And, when we're ebbing and flowing in this space, it can feel like our energy is confused. It leads to these circles or cycles of, these bursts of energy. We take on all the responsibility. And then we enter into this space of complete burnout and shutdown, because actually we can't operate on that level for long, And both of these extremes tend to stem from the same wound. I'm going to be completely honest with you here. It's a distortion of our sense of self-worth and power. It's a distortion of the fact that potentially we don't value our own time or energy. We give our power away. And how do we relate to our own sense of worth? So something to be really, really considerate of. Now, what is the energetic cost of these things? And like I've touched on, they drain us of our life force energy. So for people who are under responsible, who tend to go into a space of avoidance and denial, sometimes they can become passive. Life can become very stagnant because we're not actually avoiding what we need to do in order to take the next steps on our path. And in some circumstances, we become dependent on other people's energy. And I have seen this in some of my gorgeous clients, and this happens unknowingly. We feel we need people around us, or we feel comfortable when we're with them. It's almost like we're absorbing their light. And for those that err on the side of over responsibility, we tend to end up spreading ourselves too thin. We live in a constant state of overdrive and we are unable to replenish our own cup. And one lovely analogy that I tend to give to my clients when they come through If you are a beautiful porcelain cup sitting under a tap, every drop that comes into that cup, you then pull the cup away and give the drop of energy to someone else. That's the energy of over responsibility. But what I tend to say is you're better off popping that cup onto a saucer before it goes in under the tap for replenishment. Give yourself the time and space to say no, to not take on the responsibility of others, and to let that cup become so full from every drop of pure energy that it begins to overflow. As the saucer becomes full, you then can give from the excess, but you never deplete from the cup again. Because to remain replenished means that your power and your life force is taken care of. Only give what you can from the surplus. Now, over time, both of these energies can lead to weak boundaries and difficulty discerning what is mine versus what is someone else's. And oftentimes, the nervous system goes into such a state of dysregulation, we end up swinging between this kind of hypervigilance and collapse, overactivity and burnout. These kind of two extremes it's just so painful to navigate that on the day to day. Our soul also tends to get really fatigued, this feeling of never being enough or never being able to actually rest and replenish. This creeps into the soul energy. Now, the true healing of this means that we need to learn how to reclaim our energy and draw it back from others. And, this involves taking radical ownership over our own path without carrying what other people bring to us. And that is so hard. So for both extremes, for the under-responsible, avoidant soul that tends to kind of act in a space of denial, and also for the over-responsible soul that carries the weight of the world on their shoulders, this can be really, really tricky to take radical responsibility. It means learning how to say no. It means setting boundaries with people that we have never done that before with, setting boundaries with ourselves and getting really bloody honest with ourselves. And also going on a journey with handing back energy that is just not yours. Now, I want to speak a little bit just before we move into some of the steps for healing and integrating this awareness. I just want to step a little bit into kind of the egoic mind and how trauma basically creates these egoic thought patterns within us. Now, the ego, I tend to say to people, is a trauma response. It develops survival strategies linked to responsibilities that tend to keep us safe. And, the ego gets a terribly bad rep, but essentially it's a survival mechanism. That's what it is. And it arises from trauma. So an example of this in relation to responsibility might be, if I take everything on, I'll stay safe and people will love me. So you can see there that that survival mechanism to be safe and loved, it's actually given rise to this kind of desire to take everybody else's things on. Similarly, if I avoid responsibility, I won't be blamed or hurt. I won't be blamed for something going wrong. So we tend to avoid. And that is, again, a coping mechanism, because potentially when you were younger, when you took responsibility and did something, you got blamed for it. You got into trouble and you were emotionally or physically hurt as a response to what you did. Now, keeping in mind, these are not moral failings within us. They are protective mechanisms, but they do keep us stuck in cycles and behaviors and patterns that aren't for our greatest good. So it is important to go deep into yourself, to acknowledge them and to become aware of them. And in addition to this, I also like to highlight the ancestral patterns, because I'm all about our ancestral lineage. If you've been listening to podcasts for a while, there's so much stuff that we inherit from people without even realizing. But many of us carry inherited wounds of responsibility. So thinking about the generations who came before us, many of them survived famine, they survived war, they survived hardship, and often unconscious passions or limiting beliefs were passed down, such as I must sacrifice myself for others, or life is unsafe unless someone else provides for me. And these are really, really important things to tune into, because we can heal these inherited wounds when we identify and become aware of them down the family lineage. Are there repeating patterns in how people show up in your family and back through the family line? That is the key to kind of identifying some of these things. With regard to taking some steps to healing these wounds of responsibility and to integrating a new way of being, the first thing I'll say to people is go on a journey of awareness. Begin to really tune into the body and to identify, am I over carrying? Am I not claiming responsibility for what I should? Or potentially, do both of these facets of this wound show up in my world? You know, ask yourself what emotions arise when you consider letting go of responsibility that's not yours. How does that make you feel? Is there guilt there? I can tell you for most people there is. You know, or what arises when you consider stepping into your own power? You know, consider stepping into a new sense of responsibility for your physical health, your mental or emotional health. How does that make you feel? Does it feel like hard work? You know, really tuning into it. Again, I just want to touch on discernment. You know, discernment is a really important part of identifying and healing these wounds. So question yourself when it comes to things that arise on the day to day. And if people are asking you to do things, if they're contacting you and putting all this heavy emotional turmoil on your shoulders, you know, ask yourself in quiet contemplation, is this truly mine to carry? And the body will give you the answer. The body will absolutely give you the answer if you give it the time and space to answer. Generally speaking, I tend to find that heaviness when you ask the question results in a sign that essentially that energy belongs elsewhere and it's not yours. And sometimes when we actually ask, is this truly mine to carry? You'll get just a deep sense inside that's light and soft. And it's like, well, yeah, actually it is. And that's the realization you need to own. I also think that that healing on this journey should really involve a deep journey of boundaries, you know. And I've recorded a podcast episode on boundaries before, what boundaries look like with yourself and others. And this is the key. I actually feel like boundaries is probably one of the biggest topics that I continuously speak about day in and day out with people. This journey of what boundaries looks like. And it's just so important, you know. And when we actually can create boundaries, it gives us freedom to operate. You know where you stand, people know where you stand. And this is so good. It's actually very freeing to have boundaries, though some people have a hard time actually setting them. But generally speaking, if you can set a boundary for yourself, you can allow yourself to expand into the space that the boundary holds. And usually lovely visualization practices like imagining the solar plexus at the top of the tummy as a radiant sun expanding into a beautiful space to hold your power and creating a protective shield around it, like an energetic boundary of that radiant sun-like energy. It can be really, really powerful. Try it for a couple of minutes every day. Other work I tend to recommend on this healing journey is healing your inner child. So I have recorded a couple of podcasts previously on guilt and shame and fear. And it's really important to go on a journey with these dense kind of emotions. And you know, go on a bit of a path with this younger, gorgeous version of you and affirm to that child, affirm to that inner part of you that embedded this wound in the first place, say to them, you don't have to carry this. You don't have to carry what isn't yours. You are safe. I am going to keep you safe. And it's okay to stand in your own power and your own light. So healing inner child work can be really, really important. I also like to recommend that people go on a journey of the soul when it comes to responsibility. It's all about stepping into sovereignty. It's about independence of soul, where you embody all of these beautiful energies and reclaim your power and come into divine balance in both your yin and your yang energies. So you're looking for a lovely sense of balance internally that gives you a sense of strength. You're aligned with your soul's purpose. And what I love to say to people on this soul-led journey, when we really tune into the energy of the soul, we are here learning with each other. All of the souls that come to be with you in this world, we have this karmic dance with all of them. And if you allow others the dignity to carry the weight of their own lessons, you are doing that soul a favor. You are doing that soul a favor. They can't heal from their own karmic wounds if you continue to actually do this dance with them. You remain in your wound, they remain in their wound, and you do the karmic dance of the wound. Essentially, when you learn to set good boundaries and you actually take responsibility for what's yours and hand back what's not yours, it enforces this kind of this energy of I'm standing in my power here, and actually I trust your soul can handle the weight of this itself. And sometimes that can be sticky because we haven't shown up as that person in our life or in their life. So it can ruffle a few feathers, but I really think it's about honoring the power that these other souls have to actually carry the weight of their own lessons, that we don't need to fix it for them if you're in that space of over responsibility. And stepping into a more powerful state of responsibility for your own sense of self and your own emotional well-being actually relieves the burden from other over responsible people in your life too. So you're all learning lessons together, which is beautiful. Now, some lovely practices that I tend to recommend on this journey are things like body-based work. So breath work, breathing deep into the solar plexus can be amazing. I absolutely love it. I spoke in a previous episode into cord cutting rituals. So visualizing, connecting with the burdens within your body that are linked through energy cords. In visualization practice, you can go into that connection and sever the cords. I also love to do some really beautiful energetic work in practice when I have people on the plinth, imagining the energy of what isn't theirs coming up to the surface of their body and then physically handing it back to whoever it belongs to through visualization and energetic healing practices. It is so, so, so powerful. I also love grounding practices, walking barefoot, connecting with the earth. It's an amazing stabilizing power force. It's really, really powerful. And like I spoke into previously, a lovely solar plexus visualization meditation, healing the solar plexus with golden light energy, with the energy of the sun, that heat and that warmth is all going to be so, so lovely. So, just to finish up, I think this is such an important topic that I see around me every single day. And hopefully, you've been able to kind of sit and have a little think about what responsibility looks like in your life, whether you need to step into a more responsible space in certain aspects of your life, or potentially hand back the responsibility to others if you stepped into an over responsible role. And essentially, responsibility is the bridge between personal power and love. And I just love that, bringing it all together. And if you want some journal prompts in your life to take away, have a little think about where you avoid responsibility in your life presently. Where do you carry stuff that isn't yours? What are you responsible for that's not yours that you need to hand back? And what would balanced responsibility feel like in my body and my energy Have a little think about that. And, as you go on this journey, honor what is yours, release what is not, stand in your power and your truth and your responsibility. And with love from my heart to yours, I'll talk to you again in 2 weeks. Dr. Anthony.